So thank you very much for coming back. We'll kick off with a little bit of explanation of how the play was developed and then open the floor for any questions or comments, all right? So my name's Gillian Hunt. I work at the University of Warwick, as some of these other people do. And I'm very keen on developing theatre from research.
I've been asked by Gillian to tell you a little bit about the research and the background to this play. There's been a concern in this country for well over 20 years about ethnic minority groups and mental illness. And for a long time, people have thought it's misdiagnosis, psychiatrists don't understand what's going on. The fact is that migrants all over the world have higher rates of mental illness. This has been true for even white migrants between countries. So it's not a black and white issue, and it's to do with what migrants are exposed to. So we know now about a number of social adverse events that migrant groups, particularly deprived migrant groups, are exposed to, which increases their risk of mental illness. The other concern has been that they come into mental health services through more adverse ways, through more section, through more detention. And again, the initial thought was, well, it's maybe because psychiatrists are treating them badly. Actually, we found that that's not the case. For some reason, people seek help differently. So the reason for conducting this research was to see how different cultural groups understand emerging signs of mental illness determines how they seek help. So what we found was that in the early stages, before people start hearing voices or become very disturbed, early disturbance, all ethnic groups say, well, he's under stress or she's struggling at school. Once psychotic symptoms emerge, parents really struggle, and then they use their local networks to find out, what do I do? So the Pakistani family may end up in a mosque, the black family may end up in a church, then the white family may end up in a counseling service. So the experience and the suffering and the anguish is the same across cultural groups. It's just how they make sense of that experience that is determined partly by cultural understanding, partly by the network. But regardless of ethnicity, it is a struggle, real struggle for families to get help. And if the words that you heard from the families are actual words spoken by families to us in the research. We haven't written them. It's not an act of imagination. This is what families said.
Thank you. Would you like? I'm going to ask Claudette to just explain a little bit about how the play developed from the research, and then we'll open the floor.
Well, obviously, aside of the research, I think the key thing that perhaps inspired the concept behind the play was that Swaran made a comment to me very, very early on, and which he embodied this world of something to do with inner voices and outer lives. And that stayed with me throughout the entire process, which has been actually a very, very, very long process indeed, because initially the work was begun actually 2 years ago, which had to be postponed for a short while and then revisited again. And so in that time, I was looking and searching to find a way to develop two distinct forms of narrative, if you like. One, of course, was the verbatim text that Swaran's just referred to, and the other was the world of people who were experiencing psychosis. The interviews that we had, the interviews from the carers, were very rich. There was a huge amount of material, a vast amount of material, in fact. But the interviews from the carers were not unsurprisingly very thin. So in order to give the patients, so in order to give the people who were experiencing psychosis or had just had an episode of psychosis the necessary dignity, respect, and gravitas that I wanted, I approached a poet, somebody who I've worked with before, Julie Bowden, and asked her if she could describe this world using poetry. Then, of course, the world was further divided by the young people themselves representing the young people who were actually the subjects of the interviews. And so we had, I hope, if you like, a way of conceiving these two very different and very separate worlds. So that was Sir Aaron's early comment, which was my key inspiration.
Thank you all very much. That was absolutely mind-boggling, and I learned from Claudette just afterwards that the young actors, oh, you're all young, of course, but the youngest actors had very limited preparation for the performance today. So amazing. How much time?
We started yesterday at 10:30, so we've had like a day and a half-ish.
Amazing. That was really jumping in at the deep end of a very profound and serious subject, and you may or may not have had prior knowledge about psychosis, but I wonder how confident you feel in relating to friends or acquaintances who might be experiencing the kind of symptoms that were portrayed in the play.
I mean, it's always a delicate matter, but I think, you know, through a play like this, it's sort of, I know I myself have definitely learned how to approach people differently, just because, you know, the things in the play, you know, you do learn a lot, and, you know, after the play I definitely feel a lot more comfortable in approaching friends now than what I would before. You know, in any day and a half I've learned a lot, and I would feel confident now, and it's like, no, a bit better what to say.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think a lot of people tend not to know how to handle those type of situations. But I think, like, what I've learned, like, over the last 2 days, I have, like, felt a lot better, like, being able to at least, like, say to someone. So yeah.
Hello. Hi. My voice sounds weird, but my question is for the actors. How did you feel when you were told you'd have to work with young performers with such a delicate subject?
Yeah, okay, shall I kick things off? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating process to be able to spend just, a day and a half being able to get things together. And I think there's a tremendous creativity with everyone who's been involved, including yourself. And that really brings life to the voices, particularly of the psychosis, almost, because that was broadly the concept, if you like, that the ensemble can give voice to the psychosis. And one of the important things was that the age range that all you guys are was represented in the play, because that's really the age range where we can see. I'm not the resident expert here, but we can see the onset of a lot of the psychotic conditions. So to have you guys represented in that way was great. And I felt like it was going to be a really interesting, creative experience, and challenging for all of us, but rewarding too.
I was very excited. I work with young people all the time. So it was very exciting. But also, just adding to what Justine said, it was very important. It was an actual important decision that Claudette, our superb director, it was an actual deliberate thing that she wanted to do, to represent these young people and to bring their voices to life. I mean, the first thing was with the poetry, and the second thing was with having real young people represent. And I believe young people, just like Justine says, they bring life. They bring creativity, and every single time we're going to be doing it with a different group of young people. And I feel personally blessed to be able to work with young people and learn as well from them. They're amazing, and it is difficult because, we've been training for years doing what we do, and then for you guys to come in and be like, wow, I'm working with these, but we're like, wow, we feel so good to work with you. So thank you. We really do mean that from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for taking part and doing such an amazing piece.
Well, I think I've got nothing left to say because the guys have done it. But just based on that, I think you guys have been absolutely fantastic. And I think for us, it's a great honour to work with you guys. I think you were fantastic, so well done.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Hiya. I was just wondering, how do you feel that your research can support people in ethnic minorities suffering from mental health issues? Because I noticed that a lot of people will try to self-medicate or, deal with it within their culture. How do you feel that this knowledge can be applied to supporting people?
Well, if there was a simple answer to this, somebody would have applied it by now. What we've done directly from this play, for instance, we've tried one way where we've gone to mosques with case vignettes of psychosis, and we've taught imams, look, by all means, do the religious ceremony. It gives people comfort, it gives them succor, but it's not treatment. Tell them also to seek treatment. What we found in the research was that lots of people were seeking medical help, but more engaged with the religious help seeking, but not discussing it for fear of being ridiculed or mocked. So on one hand, we are training religious, faith-based organization. On the other hand, we are telling our psychiatric, mental health clinicians, ask people about what they believe, right? Don't just assume that you know. Don't stop at asking symptoms. Ask them about the meaning of those symptoms. And we've made a very strong recommendation to the Department of Health that NHS will have to work with third sector and faith-based organizations if we are going to crack this.
Di, would you like to comment on any of this?
Well, from a social work perspective, I think what you would want to be doing is seeing the family as a whole and trying to understand the family within the cultural context. Certainly taking seriously, really, how they view mental illness within their culture and how that might affect their help-seeking behaviour. So I think you'd try to take that into account when you're doing that work. If you were going into a situation, for example, to assess a young person, you'd be wanting to understand from the family's perspective how they were making sense of what was happening in a non-judgmental way, and maybe also, as Swaran was saying, making sure that they had information available to them that would help them to seek appropriate help from a range of different sources.
The other element in terms of cultural differences, I'll just give you a little story, and sometimes it's all about that knowledge. So I got a friend in the Asian community, because again I'm looking in terms of my character. In the Asian community, there's a lot of taboo associated with it. What they always talk about is, how do other people see us in the community? It's a massive thing. Nobody wants to turn around and go, by the way, my child, my mother, my father, my son, whoever has mental illness. There's no way they say that. The reason is, and the classic is that my friend, she was getting married. Her mother has got mental illness. They locked her in another room. And now traditionally what happens is, it's not just the husband that comes around, which, well, it's all changed now, where the groom comes around to the house. No, it's families that come around. And what they want to see is, they want to see the whole family. So they look around at the whole family and go, wait there. They're kind of gauging it. They won't say it. If they see someone's got a mental illness, what they're thinking is, further down the line, there's a probability, that's what they're saying, you know, that the grandchildren could have a mental illness. So there's a massive, massive taboo in relation to it. But again, which is a different thing. So I just thought I'd let you know that.
Okay, I just wanted to add on to this. I don't think specifically the people who are in this study will necessarily ever see this play, but because the play's been linked to Mental Health Awareness Week, and when it's performed in Birmingham, it's part of the Bedlam Festival, and when we go to Glasgow, it's part of the Scottish Festival. I've got to get this right. Arts and Mental Health, Arts, Film and Mental Health Festival. It's part of a larger debate and a raising awareness and combating stigma and enabling people to talk amongst themselves and more publicly about some of these very difficult, complex issues and situations.
Yes, getting back to the topic of mental health awareness, it was mentioned in the play that doctors don't always respond correctly, that is GPs, don't always respond correctly when a patient turns up. Could you comment on that, how that might be able to be improved?
Well, I can see some colleagues from psychiatry here, so they'll forgive me for saying this, but a bigger problem than just GPs recognizing is psychiatrists taking it seriously. The very first episode, people are reluctant to diagnose it because even as psychiatrists, we carry almost an internal stigma. We don't want to label it. So there's almost a collusion of silence between the parents want to hear, look, this is just cannabis. The young person wants to hear, well, you'll be all right. And the first episode, people respond to medication dramatically. 90% people will get well within a matter of weeks. And so it's very tempting to say, this was transient, this was stress-related, let's just stop here. We set up the early intervention movement precisely for the reason that lots of young people were not getting help till it was late. I'm very reluctant to say we should hold GPs to account. An average GP will see 6 or 7 new cases a year. You can't train them. It's not a very common condition at a GP level. You can't train GPs to do that. We've tried, and I think GPs have got a lot better. But I think a much greater improvement has to be within mental health services.
Going back to one of the questions that was asked earlier about how people are going to know more about how to deal with young people that are going through these issues. It's about mainly, like I said, educating people. So that's not just going to the GP and saying, I need help, or the psychologist taking them seriously. It's about educating the teachers around them, the school nurses, even like looked after nurses on like children and young people that are in care, because they have so many difficulties from such a young age, and then having to deal with all those things and almost growing up before they're supposed to. And people think, oh, they're really independent and they're really mature. On the outside, they're shining, but on the inside, once behind their closed doors, they are crumbling and falling apart. And people need to be able to just look a little bit past that mirror that young children and young people show. I hope that helped. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think I would just echo that. I think I've just completed a project here in Nottingham with young people with mental health issues, and interestingly, they've talked quite openly about why they might not go to their GP surgery or why they might not engage with health professionals. And often they won't. Often that's not the first place that they will turn for help. So I think, to go back to your question, there's something about the kind of help that young people want that we as health professionals don't always get that right from the beginning, and we need to be very mindful of that. I think also what came across from the play tonight, certainly for me, was just how scary living in that world of auditory hallucinations, of tactile hallucinations, how scary that is for a young person. And if you're dealing with all of that and those reservations about health professionals generally, that partly probably explains why young people aren't going where we might think they would go. And as you say, they're probably going to other places, they're going to youth groups, they're accessing other kinds of support services in the first instance.
Just want to say, and just to sort of quickly add to that, because in the play, if you recall, the daughter doesn't want to go to the doctor, and there is, of course, this very difficult issue of trying to persuade somebody who perhaps doesn't have any insight on their condition that they should be going to a doctor. Anyway, I thought I'd just pop that in.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things the play puts across so eloquently is, you know, that you have parents and children. Parents don't understand. Children are frightened. But at the same time, there are groups of people who don't have a parent in that position, who are facing huge levels of adversity and multiple forms of adversity. And I think from my point of view, I want to put some of these messages across to social workers who are dealing with young people who may have had 22 foster homes. People may not know if they're right-handed or left-handed, let alone, what they're feeling inside. And, some of these things, there are some salutary lessons from this. Young people with mental health problems are overrepresented in the young prison population. They're overrepresented in the young homeless population. And many of these young people are by that point, very alienated from anybody. Not only do they not trust going to their GP, they haven't got a GP. They don't actually trust going to anybody. And, they may have some peer support, But the lesson they've learnt so far in life is that adults actually don't look after you. And so, you know, there are some particularly vulnerable groups of young people.
Okay. Up there, and one at the front. Okay.
Hello. I think what came across really very powerfully in the play to me, from my own personal experience as well, is just how inadequate language is sometimes to express the tumult, the pain, the fear, the horror that's within you. And they're the mutual incomprehension between parents, between brothers and sisters. It's you. If somebody asks you how you're feeling, the words seem paltry compared to what's actually going on. And that's, I think that's obviously a major problem that it's very difficult to get past. But the very quick question as well is, how far do you think social class cuts across all these communities we're talking about? I mean, coming from a white working class background, there were problems there with stigma. You're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be masculine, you know, you're supposed to be machismo. And there were real problems there. I didn't know where to go. I felt like I was letting my family down or not being a man. So perhaps they cut across all communities.
Your first point about language being inadequate is absolutely spot on. How do you explain something when language itself is broken? One of the things that happens in psychosis is, you know, your thoughts become incoherent. How do you express distress when the language itself is broken? So I do a kind of role play with medical students about psychosis. You can reduce a normal person to a state of bewilderment within 5 minutes. Your second point is absolutely right. For too long, we've thought of it as a kind of black and white issue. It's a class. The divide in this country is not race or ethnicity, it's class. And I'm sure that in white working class kids, it'll be the same, absolutely the same problem of deprivation, underprivilege. As an aside, I'm a commissioner for the Equality and Human Rights Commission. We're just producing a report on whether Britain has become fairer in the last 5 years. This is hot off the press.
I'm amazed you have to write a report.
Well, that's what we are supposed to do. In educational achievement, the group that is most disadvantaged is white working class boys. Nobody speaks for them. Absolutely no one speaks for them. So I think your point is very well made. That's right. And they have been truly disenfranchised. You know, the white working class boys have truly been. I can today make a racist joke about only one group, that's white working class boys, in a public place.
Okay, there are a couple of questions here, and then if you pass it along afterwards.
So I greatly enjoyed the production. I thought it got onto a very important message. At the moment, at university, we're trying to drive the fact that mental health is becoming a more important issue for people my age. One thing I want to ask about is, from my point of view, what I got across most from the play, and this may or may not be what you wanted me to get across at all, was a sense of they feel a sense of social shame. So that they struggled to tell the parent that there was something wrong, but because the parent doesn't know, the parent then gets ashamed that their child is like this. What would you say to you're at university 3 months a year? Your parents may be completely abroad. Who do you turn to, and how do you think you should tell them that you've got something wrong?
So you've made 2 or 3 points, if I try and cover them, and then others might have to say. The point about student mental health, today UK universities has released a report on student mental health showing rising rates of help seeking. Some of that is because people are more willing to come forward, but some of it is definitely increasing pressure on our young people. Not many people in the audience will know. Other than dementia, every major mental illness begins around the age of 16 to 20. So 50% begin before 16. 75% begin before the age of 25. When young people are winning Wimbledon, when they are at the peak of their physical power, they are psychologically their most vulnerable. So we've done a recent project in the University of Warwick showing how many students at any given point have measurable levels of distress and how few are willing to seek help. Some of it is internal stigma. Some of it may be lack of awareness, but we have to be honest with ourselves, a lot of us have carry a stigma, and it's a difficult one to change, but we've got to change it, and we've got to deal with it. And when you ask young people, who do you ask for help? Most of them say, I ask no one. The second is, I ask my friends. So one of the things you can do is you can use university networks to spread, and which is what we are doing in the university. We are trying an internet-based service which is anonymous. We are trying to arrange awareness through networks. But it's a difficult problem of stigma.
I think all professionals probably may have a tendency to be patronising, and I think all forms of education really of professionals, medical professionals, social work professionals, we're making a lot more effort to involve people on the receiving end and to acknowledge that their view, their perspective is absolutely vital. You're never going to get anywhere in terms of working with somebody, whether it's a child, an adult, an older person, if you haven't listened to what's important to them. And partly that's sometimes difficult because of, you use different words for different things. But I hope the days are gone when we don't listen. I think we may still have to try very hard to listen, but I think that the issue's on the agenda in a far more active way than it ever has been before.
I believe it's all of ours collective responsibility to find out, to learn and to know what's going on so we can holistically support one another. We should all go out and watch more shows like this, or go and look up or watch the documentary. We should go out and try and find out, because that's something that would be really valid for yourself and for others. The more that we know, the more that we are empowered to support one another.
That's the final word.
That's all I need to
say.
say.
Thank you very much for coming.